Welcome back to Pinhole Quilting. I'm Liz Holpin and I'm going through a series of the steps that we would do in order to quilt a quilt using more custom quilting on the Moxie Pro Stitcher Lite, which is the computerized version of the Pro Stitcher Premium for the lighter machines. That's the Moxie and the Simply 16. I've got this on a loft frame. It's a little cut down model, but it's good enough and big enough for what I need to do. Okay, so rather than threading it with white, which you won't be able to see, I've picked this thread, which is one of the ones that I'll use when I'm actually quilting. So in order to do this, I'm going to thread it up and then I'll show you how we can quickly pull the thread through to change the thread to white, which is actually what I want to use. So it goes on this spool pin and straight up to the cone holder. The cone holder sort of silver thing here. It's a technical term. Now next, hope you can see this. I'm just gonna, yeah, you should be able to see this. I'm going to stand on this side so I'm not in your way. And it goes from the back to the front, back to the front, from the back to the front. With glide, I actually just put it through the top and the bottom. And this is called a pre-tension. It gets rid of any twist on the thread. And if you're doing it live on a video, you'll find that you can't get it through like that. Then there's a little guide, and you just move it to the back so that, or poke it through if you wish. Now this is the critical point. I'm just going to trim my thread a bit so you can see this better. This is the critical point, and what I'll do is I'll just get it inside the tension disc. So the tension disc is just there, and I use like a motion like as though you were cleaning your teeth, and then it goes to the other side of the spring. So the spring does this. This is normal motion for the spring, and it basically does this so it enables the thread to go in front of the bobbin case whenever it's stitching. And then we go through the take-up lever. All right, so tension discs, spring. This is actually called the stirrup, goes under there, take up lever, and then this little piggy tail. Then I test the tension, how tight is it, and just see whether it's too tight or too loose before threading it through my needle. Now I need to change my needle. I've put a new needle in, it's a new project, so I'm going to take this one out, I'll put a new 16 needle in. So I'm just going to undo that and get myself a new needle. I'm going to put that in. Okay, welcome to threading up. So threading up, I'm just going to unthread this and just show you how to rethread it. But one of the things I wanted to mention, because I won't be doing it in a moment, is when you're unthreading, the easiest way to unthread is just undo the thread or pull out the thread from underneath the tension spring, and then just pull it all the way back. Once it's out of the tension spring, generally that means you've not really got a problem anymore. So I've got a close-up here, a dual view, where we've got the wider shot and then close-up on where all the action is. And so what I do, I've got my blue thread here to demonstrate first, and then I'll pull through and do the white on the quilt. And I'm just going to thread this up. I'll go around the front, avoiding tripping over any trailing wires. Unlike Mr. John Scott from Sewing Street, who the day that we were appearing on that program ended up tripping over a camera wire and going to A&E with a cut above his eye. But being an absolute trooper, John came back and did the program. By 11 o'clock, he did it about 7 o'clock in the morning. So what we've got here is the cone holder. You've got a sort of my words escape me. A guide above the cone holder, it needs to go up there. And then it comes this pre-tensioner. There's 3 holes in the pre-tensioner. They go from the back to the front, from the back to the front, from the back to the front. But with some threads, and with glide, one of them, I prefer to have it skip the middle hole. And we teach people more about that on our foundation workshop. After going through the little guide above the tension assembly, I'm going to now floss up. I get the thread and I go underneath, and then I pull up and I do like this seesaw motion, and then I take up the slack by pulling on my left hand. Now it's through the tension assembly. I go round the little spring. The spring in normal operation will do this. You might be wondering why. And the reason is when it's in that position, it's slack enough for the thread, when it goes down through to the bobbin assembly, to go around the front of the bobbin case under the stirrup. Just going to trim this off because I've pulled through a whole load, and then put that in there like so. So under the stirrup, through that hole in the take-up lever, adjust the thread at this point based on your knowledge and experience of the amount of tension required, which will build up the more you do this. So I recommend you pull on the thread and just think, is that too loose? Is it too slack? Or is it too tight and it's going to break? Because you don't want to start stitching within seconds of stitching, find that it's all broken and you have to thread it up again. It's really irritating. So, right, I haven't put my needle in, so I'm going to put my needle in. This is a size 16 needle. You can use a 16 or an 18 with the glide. So I'm just going to orient that to the front, facing me, 6:30 position, half an hour, 6 on the clock face. There we go. And then I put my finger behind the needle, I go down the face of the needle and pop it in. Don't even have to take my glasses off to see what I'm doing. Yes, I have done it quite a few times, but it's more about the concept of it, of going down the needle. The groove is designed to help the thread go through the needle. Now, what do you want to do? How can you more easily get your next cotton, your next thread on there? Basically, if I wanted to change from this blue to the same sort of thread, i.e. this white, I would just cut my thread. I would put my spool on here, which is my white, which you wouldn't have been able to see if I'd used that as the demo. See, I had thought ahead. Put the two ends together, wrap it around your finger and pop it through to make a little knot. There we go, little knot. Now, when you pull, you can't get it all the way through the needle unless you're very, very lucky. I have done it, but I wouldn't recommend trying it. Now you can pull that thread through, but when it gets to the tension assembly, like right now, ease those tension discs apart by putting your fingernail in between and then pull on it and pull it all the way through until just above the needle. Don't forget the guide above the needle hole. That's one that sometimes people forget, particularly if they've just rethreaded and it's come out of that little hole probably. Pop that in there, down the groove, pop it in. See, it wasn't just a fluke. I've done that twice now in a row. This is my Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead moment. Heads. Right, so there we go. That's threading up. Okay, so I've got my wadding in place. So this is quite thick polyester wadding. This is for a charity quilt and it's what I was given with the quilt. And I thought, actually, I don't use this kind of wadding very often. So I want to see how it quilts. Right, now I'm going to load up my, let's lay that flat. I think I'm going to float the top actually. Show you how we float it. So what we want to do is put in a plumb line or a reference line, and I can do that using the Pro Stitcher Lite with the locking of the x-axis, which is great. And I mentioned before about this here being a little slack, so I'm just going to tension that a little bit more. Tension wise, we should be able to get up to our first joint of our thumb very easily, so it's easily slack enough. So I'm just going to tension that a little bit more. And that should be, still plenty. You don't have to have it drum tight. People don't always realise that. I'll just put this side tension on. Not too far forward because I need to be able to get access to it. We will have it on later. Okay, so in Pro Stitcher, what I need to do first of all in order for the gears and everything to work is I need to set up my area. So I set up my frame space first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this camera so that you can see how I set this up. There we go. All right. So we've got our Pro Stitcher Lite here. Just bring it forward a fraction. And on here, I'm going to define the frame space. So the frame space is basically the maximum area that I can quilt at any one time. So this is going to be useful for the future, but I'm just defining the absolute maximum. So I put it not all the way back because I can't quilt all the way back. We're going to press the 2 corner on the right hand side to add a point, and then I'm going to take it over here all the way over to the right hand side where I'm going to define my second point. So my second point will be down here. Okay, can't go all the way forward, needs to go a little way back, and somewhere like this. I know I've got plenty of space on this system. So I've added the second one, and what you see is on the, oops, let's just get that tripod there. On the tablet here, I've now got a black rectangle when I pressed this button just to the left of the minus key. So that's defining the area in which I can now put my designs, and if I'm doing edge to edge, it'll run below that because it'll be all on the take-up rail, be all on the rail at the front. And as we progress up the quilt, you'll see the design going up here if we were doing edge to edge, and we'd just be able to quilt whatever's in that rectangle. It tells us how much we can quilt at a time. It's pretty useful. Before we start actual quilting, I've picked out some threads now. The other thing we need to do is make sure that the machine is nicely oiled, cleaned out, etc. So we've got a brush here, and I've got my oil. So I will take out the bobbin case. Actually, the camera on this side. Take out. Oh, drop the bobbin case. Drop the bobbin. See, the reason I do these things is so that if anybody else does them, they think it's completely normal. So here's the bobbin case, and I'm going to change this cream one for a white bobbin. This is a wonderful bobbin. They come in boxes like this of 24, or you can get mixed boxes, and we also do collection boxes as well. And they're easy. They're just really easy. They're an 80 weight deco bob thread, and they're nice and fine, so you get plenty of thread on your bobbin. And I'm just going to test it. That looks fine. If it wasn't, I've got a screwdriver in my pocket somewhere. I had a screwdriver in my pocket. I promise. There it is, screwdriver. I'm just going to tighten that a fraction. But actually on the Moxies I tend to keep it pretty loose. So this is the bobbin test. So bring it upright and then take your hand away, and it should drop nice and smooth. That's about right. I'm happy with that. There's a little sort of leeway in how you might have it set up, and that's really good. So that's my bobbin case. I'm just going to clean out in the bobbin area, make sure it's defluffed. There's a nice bit of fluff just came out there. And every 3 months or so you might want to take this stitch plate off, and we've got some videos on YouTube where we show you how to do that. Okay, oil. This is a semi-industrial machine, and I've got a nice oiler here with a long spout, and I put a drop of oil. There's better videos that show it. I'm not going to do a close-up on this, but there's a drop of oil at the bottom of where the hook goes around, so it's called the race, and that bit of oil just lubricates between the two metal moving parts. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there. Alrighty. So I've got my backing fabric loaded on the frame. It's set up, the loft frame is set up in the low position, so my backing fabric is on the second rail in. I've put my wadding between. I'm not going to use this front rail in the conventional sense because I'm actually going to float my quilt. I think it's important to show you how we do that as well. And I'm going to be using the Pro Stitcher Lite. So I've got the Pro Stitcher Lite set up here, okay, and I'm going to set the stitches to using the handlebar controls. And if you've got a Moxie, you'll understand how to use these, but just as a refresher, we press minus and plus together. That takes us into a grid menu of 9 options. The first one is the one that controls the stitch regulation. To select it, I press the up and down arrow. I know you can't see this, but the screen's fairly small. And then I move through the options until I've got the C, and I press the up and down arrow again to select it. And in the box, we select how many stitches per minute. The next screen that comes up has C and the number of stitches per minute when we're going slowly or stationary, and it's set at 175, which is fine. And what that means is that as we slow down into the points, it's going to do some extra stitches. All right, so that means that our points are nice and sharp. We use it for pantographs and we use it for Pro Stitcher. So I've got my Pro Stitcher Lite. The first thing that I need to do whenever I'm going to stitch out, I need to set my frame space, and it won't allow me to stitch or use the gears until I've done that. It's a kind of fail-safe for people who are using Moxie with Pro Stitcher Lite. Now the frame space is the area that we can actually quilt at any one time. It isn't the whole area of your quilt, and it isn't the area that we're necessarily going to set up for quilting at the moment. It is the area, the maximum space that we can quilt at any one time. So I set it up so it's just behind the maximum throat space and to the right. And I go into, on the tabs at the top, I go into the area tab and I go into frame space. I'm just going to move you closer so that you can see this. Excuse the bumpiness. There we go. All right, you should be able to see my screen now. And what I'm going to do, I'll just tilt that light down, otherwise you won't be able to see anything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press the frame space button up here. Let me just tilt that, there we go. Frame space. And this is going to be the first corner down here, which is basically my bottom right. And I press 2 corner here. Turn that light off, it's not helping the situation. There we go. And it will go down in this corner here, so I press 2 corner, like so, makes a little ping noise, and then I'm going to move my machine over until I'm at the top left of the quilt. Again, I'm not going to push it all the way back, that's all the way back, I'm going to move it forward a little fraction here, and I'm going to press 2 corner again. Okay, now I've set that up. What I need to do is do my horizontal line, a plumb line on my quilt to help for the alignment and the positioning of my quilt top. So I'm going to put the horizontal channel lock on, okay, so that's just that one there. And first I'll pull up the thread. I'm going to hold the quilt thread in one hand and just do needle down, needle up. Now actually, one other option you've got here, and I'm just going to show you this at a wider shot. The other option I've got here is that I could just use the back rail of my frame. If you'll notice, if I push it all the way back, even without using a channel lock, it'll actually do a nice straight line. So as long as you've not got any danger of hitting a pin, that's a really efficient and quick way to do a horizontal line. However, I've got Pro Stitcher Lite, so I want to show you Pro Stitcher Lite. So I'm going to put, I'm going to do needle down, needle up first, and pull up my bobbin thread, which is white, so I can't see it. Pull up the bobbin thread, hold those 2 thread ends, and put my horizontal channel lock on. So now it'll only go side to side. Okay, I'm going to go back into my stitches per inch here. I'm just going to reduce this now to 6 stitches per inch. Press start. Just mentioning, with the glide foot, it actually enables you to glide over this very thick wadding. Okay, notice that when I get to the end, it'll actually turn itself off because it's got an auto shut off on this version, which is really handy. I'm going to trim my threads. You can just move it to the side and just trim those threads. And then take the horizontal channel lock off, and now I'm going to get my quilt top. Let's just tilt this down a bit so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, this is the quilt top. Make sure you've got it the right way up. I have done that before. Yes, I know. If you're talking about making little errors every now and then, I have done a few. So line this up so that it's actually lying on or just below the line all the way along that you just did. That's a plumb line. That's a straight, nice reference line that we're going to use. And I put some pins in then at an angle just to hold it. This quilt frame is loose enough that I can put the pins in without having a problem. Although whenever I say without having a problem, that's when I usually set myself up. I should stop saying that. Okay, so we're going to put these in, final one, and then I'm going to do a wiggly line in the area of what will be the binding on the top. So bring your machine back over, still on 6 SPI, and make sure that the corners are correct. I'm just going to adjust that one a little. Make sure it's level and lined up. Beautiful. All right. So I've got my side grips on as well, and I've got a nice amount of space at the sides for testing out my wadding, and I haven't got to worry about it being skewed or anything. So let's just do that wiggle stitch, and I might just bring my camera a little closer so you can see this. So, but first of all, I'm just going to do needle down, needle up, bring up the bobbin thread again, and do a few securing stitches, and then start. Okay, let's just bring you over. You can see what I'm talking about. I position you just there. Tilt you down a bit. There we go. So holding onto the quilt and just easing in any fullness. Put a bit of weight on just ahead or just behind where you're stitching will help. As I'm stitching, I noticed a seam that is a little loose, but we'll quilt that in. Try not to do this or this. What you're trying to do is get the quilt square. And the final bit. You could also put on your vertical channel lock and just stitch down towards you at this point. Again in the binding. Nice big stitch, 6 SPI, as far as that will go. Okay, and then needle down, needle up. Take that away, take off your vertical channel lock, otherwise it won't work. And just bring up the bobbin thread, needle down, needle up. Take it over to the left hand side and take out those pins. They are white, and on a white quilt it's easy to forget that they're in there. Do not forget they're in there. That would be a disaster. All right, let's just take a little bit of a wider shot so you can see me going down the left hand side now. Again, I'm going to use the vertical channel lock. I want to make sure that's reasonably square. Might as well try and not have any pressure on it. Okay, and so we're going to go down this side, needle down, needle up, bring up your bobbin thread, securing stitches, 1, 2 or 3 if you would like, a vertical channel lock, and I just stitch down this side in the binding area. Until you can't go any further. Take off the vertical channel lock, pull down on your thread rather than disturbing the stitches, and go to the side, trim your threads, and you're done. So now we're ready to start stitching in the ditch. All right, take out your pins. And for one of our local customers, the lovely Sharon, do remove your pins. Do not attempt to sew over your pins. She has a habit of doing so and has knocked her timing out as a result. So please don't be a Sharon. I know she wouldn't mind me saying it. Right, let's just put on the horizontal channel lock and just see how square that is. No, it's not very square. So what I need to do is, if I do take off the horizontal channel lock, I can do a mark and just stitch in the ditch by marking a line. All right, so let's just have a look at that. So on my screen, take off the light, move you up. In Pro Stitcher, so if we were in File or whatever, Pro Stitcher, instead of it being in the quilt option, I'm now going to go to the record option on the right hand side. I've got mark. On Pro Stitcher Lite we've got mark and clear. If you've got Pro Stitcher Premium you've also got record, but we don't have record on here, we've just got mark, but that's fine, that's what we want. Pro Stitcher tab, record, and then press the first point for mark. Okay, and then if it looks like your border or what we're doing is quilting in the ditch is going to be slightly off, you're adjusting this each time by going along the line that you want to stitch. This is in the ditch. Just do all these marks. This is going to stabilize the border. Right, I've just done a straight line. Now let's quilt that out. Make sure that you can see what I'm doing. Let's just bring you in. And we're going to go into Pro Stitcher. This time it's going to be quilt. Let's just have a look so you can see. If I move my chat and my crosshairs, you can hopefully see there's a line there. It's a little wonky because that reflects the quilt. And it's going to stitch. I've got pull up on. I haven't done tie off start and end. I'm just going to do a few of those as and when I need it manually. So let's see how that works. Don't forget to change your stitches per inch to what you need. So I'm going to go back to the 11 stitches per inch. I'm in cruise 175 stitches per minute. All right, so let's quilt that, run, proceed, and manually do the pull up. I can just let it move back. And it's going to just do stitch a line. Brilliant. So now that's done that stitch line, let me just show you. I know it's in white, so it would be difficult to see, but it's actually just done stitching in the ditch all the way along here. Okay, so that's now stabilized between here and here, and I'm going to do the same in this section here, and then I'm going to do some verticals. So first of all, I'm going to bring up my thread. If I wanted to do some tie-offs, I could do that, but I know that I'm going to be doing a few more things in that corner, so I'm not too worried about it, particularly with the glide thread. Okay, so this one, Can I do this one? Yes, I can. And again, it's going to be in the ditch. So go into clear. I'm going to close selected. That was the line I just did. And I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go back into Pro Stitcher, record, mark. That's my first line. Just keep marking. You can put in loads and loads of these points as you wish. So I'm just kind of judging where the needle's going to be going and if my inner border is wonky or not. I don't really want to stitch on the blue if I can avoid it. There was one section there where I did stitch on the blue, but just keep going, mark, 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 mark. Now I'm ready to stitch. Yep, you should be able to see all of that. Okay, so Pro Stitcher, quilt, run, proceed, and pick up the bobbin thread, resume. Excellent. Okay, I'll just do one more needle down, needle up, and then bring up my bobbin thread. So now I've done my 2 horizontal lines. I'm going to move the quilt up a little bit so that I can stitch as much as possible of the vertical. And I'm just cutting my thread ends off. I'm not tying them in or anything. So to let the quilt go forward, what I do is I loosen off this backing rail, which you can now see. Take off the side clamps. That one's off, I did that one. And move it forward so that you can, oh, where's that not moving? Oh, okay, if you've done what I've done here, which is to put the, that's not a good idea. Always take off these super clamps from the front first, because that's what I use just to hold it temporarily. And let that off and let that off, and now you can wind it. See? It's great, isn't it? You're going to do all of these things. So I need to come back a bit. Okay, I've gone too far. So release it, come back a bit. Now tighten that one up so that I can stitch that one. That one's on, that one's on. Make sure the wadding's not hooked up. Put that one on and then put the clamps on. He's just holding that front bit of the quilt top so that as I move it on square. Now you can use a tape measure to center mark your quilt. I haven't got it on this frame. All right. So that looks good. So now I'm going to do the same thing using record and mark. So I'm going to clear, go File, Close Selected, which will close the one that I did for the horizontal. And I'm going to use Pro Stitcher, Record, Mark, and just move down. As far as it can go. And I will also, because I've moved it on a fraction, I'm just going to do a little bit more stitching in the ditch, and I'm going to put the vertical channel lock on for this section. And take off the channel lock, move it to the side, trim my threads. Hopefully you're seeing the sort of pattern of things, and this will become semi-automatic the more you do it, because this is custom quilting, not edge to edge, so it does take a little bit more time, and that should be reflected if you're doing it as a business in the pricing that you charge. All right, so now I'm going to do my vertical, which I've already designed, and it's going to stitch down there. Now this is interesting. I've gone outside my frame space by the look of it. What happens if you go outside the frame space? Will it do it? error. Design is outside the frame space because I went a little bit too far. Now, one thing you could do, let's just redefine the frame space. This is something that happens with the Pro Stitcher. If you try and do something that's outside the frame space, it says, for safety's sake, I don't want you hitting this rail. So it's basically saying you can't do that. So I'm going to redefine my frame space and pull it just a little bit further forward than what I had. And that should, oh, it's very close. I might have to, let's see if it does it again. Pro Stitcher quilt, run, proceed. Okay, that's good. And you notice it's moving itself up there. Oh, I'm just going to pause, because one thing I didn't do, I didn't put on the side clamps, and that does make a difference. Using Pro Stitcher, it's a good idea to put those side clamps on. And I'm just going to eyeball this and just see, having done that stitching, did it affect where it's going to stitch? I think we're okay. Okay, pull up pause and move it aside. One of the things they recommend in Pro Stitcher Lite is when you position the needle at the start of the work, you don't have to position it exactly over it. In fact, it does slightly better by kind of positioning itself. I'm happy with that. That's great. So one more stitch just to hold that in position. And away we go. I'm going to do the other side. Now you could use a ruler for this, but I just wanted to show you that this is a method that you can use, and I used it a lot on a quilt I did recently, a log cabin quilt. So File, Close Selected, and then go into Pro Stitcher Mark. I won't do that final one because it's very close to the edge, and I'm just going to let that run. So go File, so Pro Stitcher Quilt, Run, Proceed. And you see you kind of get into the rhythm of this, so it should be nice and easy to do. Okay. Bring up your thread. Now while I'm here, I'm actually going to use Mark to do these flying geese. Or should I do them in the blue? The way they've been sewn, I'm probably better to do them in the blue. So I'll come back and do that later when I'm going to do the blue thread. I'm going to move it on now so I can do some more of this stabilizing, stitching in the ditch. I'm going to take off my super clamps this time because I forgot last time. And there we go. Right, move it on, move it on. So I can see that my last bit of stitching was down to here, and I want to be able to do, quite puffy this quilt, isn't it? Just about there should be good enough. I think it's good to have a few different options when you're doing quilting like this, that enables you to choose from your selection of tools which one you prefer. Do you like doing ruler work in combination with Pro Stitcher Lite? That's certainly something I do, and I think it's a great way to go. So go down to 6 stitches per inch. Let's just do this edge. Didn't put the channel lock on that time. Don't have to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But it's a good test of whether you've got it on straight and square. So, it's not a bad thing to do, particularly when you're learning. Let's just put it on this one so I can show you. So just bring it towards you. Pretty happy with that. It's really square. So that's really good. It stayed within the edge of my quilt. Now we're going to do the mark for the next section. So starting from the in to go to the out, I'm going to move and do that section there. Oh, I've just noticed I could do with bringing it forward this way. Now you've just got to let that off and then just tighten both of these. So even though I've got those clamps on, there is still a little bit of leeway with that. Okay, so, right, I will stitch in the ditch down this section here and use record and mark. So Pro Stitcher file, close selected, let's redo that one, Pro Stitcher, record, mark for the first point, mark, 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 mark. And you'll see, I mean, one of the things that when you go to that Pro Stitcher mark, you can actually do a jump. So you could, in theory, do that and then do a jump, stitch, and just stitch that afterwards. I won't do that at this point, but that is something you can do. You can put in a jump stitch. So let's run, move it aside, pull it up, and resume. There we go, that's all done. Okay, deliberate mistake. Didn't change my stitches per inch back to 11. Now what can you do about that? You could overstitch it, or you could take it out. So this is where, yet again, I prove that it's really good for me to show you what to do and what not to do, she says in a very high voice. So Pro Stitcher and record, mark, come down this other side. I hope you're concentrating more than I am, because that does make a difference. Right, and then go quilt. Notice I'm not saving any of these because I don't really need to. Go within an inch or two of where the start position is. Pull up the thread, resume. And you'll note sometimes I do this thing where I sort of just touch the quilt. I find it's a bit of a habit of mine, and it isn't always a good thing, because when you take your hands away again, it can create a few inaccuracies in your quilt. So I've come down, I've done this, we've gone across, we've come down here with a slightly longer stitch, and I'm going to do this one. But first of all, I want to move down to the next section, which is there. So looking across, it's about there. Move your machine back so that you can, I might not even have to let that off because I moved it forward. So it is, I need to be able to get to there, which is just about okay. It's a little bit tight on that one. Don't want to stretch it too much. I'm just checking whether, there's some reference lines here. We've got this edge of this block, and so you can see whether that lines up with the flat line of the super clamp at the front here, which is quite useful. All right, so we're going to do this one in the middle after we've done this one. So 11 stitches per inch. A little check sheet would be useful, wouldn't it? So file, close, selected to get rid of the previous line, and away I go down. Pro Stitcher, record, mark, 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 mark. Pro Stitcher quilt, and run. Proceed. Resume. Oh, it said it was outside the frame space, so it couldn't stitch that final bit. It just shows you that sometimes it will let you do that. Actually, it wasn't outside the frame space, but they recommend that you leave about 1/2 inch margin. All right, now on this one, what I'm going to do is show you an alternative. Just bring you around here to what I've been doing, which is to do the vertical channel lock instead. I was so careful. I was being so careful not to trip over the wire and do a John Scott, and I ended up tripping over the wire and doing a John Scott, but I didn't go the whole hog and end up in A&E. I'm going to put on my vertical and just see how close this is. Could I edge it? Could I just kind of touch the quilt and just use my vertical channel locks, which would be a bit quicker than doing the record. And more complex designs are really good with the record, you know, where we're going around these fine geese and stuff. Or we could use a ruler. So, you know, pick your weapon. Pick your weapon. So on this one, I'm going to use the vertical channel lock. So first of all, I pick up the thread where I last stitched. I'm going to do some securing stitches. Bring up my threads, do some locking stitches. So 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to put the vertical channel lock on and just stitch down. You know, if it was slightly out and I wanted to adjust it slightly, I could just take that vertical channel lock off and ease it over by just even a fraction. Will help. Right on the ditch there, which is great. So as you can see, that's a little quicker in sometimes. And I'm going to just pick that bobbin thread up and do the same. So I'm going to proceed like this, going down the quilt, stabilizing it in these blocks. I'm going to do this block here in the blue. So I'll just do one more section of white and then I'll be able to do this blue all in one go. Then I'll keep on going with the white as I proceed down the quilt. Right. Let's take this back. I hope you like that view. Can be useful. Moving on to the next section. So I've done all the way down to here. I need to restart it there. So it's about there. Put the things on. Put the clamps on. And this might seem like a lot of faff, but you know, it's going to be good because then I'm just going to tackle that whole first section and be able to change the thread and stuff and roll it back as and when I need it, because that block is bigger than I can do in my throat space. Let's just try the vertical channel lock option now. All right, so vertical channel lock on. Great. Take it off, move away, come back, pull up your bobbin thread, cut that, come over here, and let's just get these to the same point. I slightly got that wrong. If you get it wrong, you can do it again. And then pick up your bobbin thread, some securing stitches, and vertical channel lock. There we go. As far as it will go. Take the channel lock off, away you come back. I hope this is making sense, and I didn't do the 6 stitches per inch over here, so let's do that and just secure that edge. Go up to 11 again, in case I forget, like I did last time. You know, I'm not the only one who does that, because on the Pro Stitcher Premium, they've actually got a thing where you can go between regular stitches and baste, and they now have a warning, you're in basting stitch, because you're not the only person who's ever done it, right? We are always in good company. Okay, I'm going to do the same on the other side.